Wanted to break down the flywheel or conical based resistance for energy system development. So, if you look through the rationale, you can see that we're going to focus on more glycolytic energy system development. So, trying to get into this 45 to 70-second window past that lactate threshold. One key would be looking at potentially your baseline aerobic fitness. So, what is your VO2 max? If it's in this like 30 to 40 range, it's probably going to be hit really early. You could corroborate that with potentially NIRS and looking at potentially your NO production and seeing the overconsumption of oxygen early and getting into this lactate threshold quicker. But the other part is that's kind of the point. And, we always talk about this premise of high low or vertical integration and looking at bifurcating your focus on potentially anaerobic phosphagen development as well as aerobic oxidative development and then staying away from that middle ground. But there's going to be a point that, yeah, that actually is beneficial to you. One note, though, I'd say is shorten up your meso. You probably have a smaller window to actually developing this. And the other point that I think is really important for looking at a circuit or looking at maybe a series of exercises that we want to include to get more of a targeted energy system focus is this premise of let's think about rotational vectors. Let's think about transverse plane. And it could be as simple as maybe a rotational chop or a rotational lift. It could be maybe this pulling in this horizontal type of direction. So I want to maybe a pull, a push. The other thing is looking at potentially changing your stance. So I could be in a split stance, a single leg stance. I could be perpendicular. So the inside shoulder is facing the resistance as opposed to my sternum. And all of that is going to just change the angle or orientation of that resistance. So let's say that I do a row here, which would be a horizontal vector. And in a sagittal plane, I can turn perpendicularly. And now I have more of a rotational effect. I get into a split stance, and then that changes that thorax rotation because that left pelvis or my opposite pelvis is now counter rotated, and I'm loading maybe that spiral back line, a little bit more external oblique, maybe internal oblique on the opposite side. So as we're breaking down, I guess when we're thinking about incorporating this, there's that opportunity to really load the transverse plane and then the rotational vector more so than you would in a normal circumstance. And one thing that I think is paramount when you get into this glycolytic energy system, which one of the premises, the reason behind that is because the constant resistance facilitates higher quality longer because we can modulate that resistance, but it also is going to get to that threshold faster because there's no such thing as a easy rep with flywheel or conical. That this definitive moment is okay, well, we can double down on pushing vertical vector, horizontal vector, sagittal plane oriented stuff. Sure. Windows are shrinking and preparing something for a dynamic, multivariate environment that's chaotic or complex is going to be not necessarily there. So, and we're breaking this down. Yeah, put in your mind that, okay, this is, I got to check a lot of boxes. I only got like 3 days to work out. But the other element of this is, okay, well, now I can check a big box of hitting the rotational and transverse vector because that glycolytic energy system zone is going to be a smaller window. And I want to make sure that I'm pushing in that direction. So we'll go past the movement prep, but I just one note though, it's like one thing I think would be very interesting to look at for everyone is glycolytic is this intersection of heavy and long, or if we look at it from a lactic energy system zone, and just things get exposed quicker. So lack there of mobility, lack there of control at end ranges is probably going to be more exposed here than it would be in, let's just say, a really light and long or really heavy and short. I'm just being transparent on the note of glycolytic energy system is really, really challenging to maintain quality. And I think we could look at this in terms of logic is looking at traditional adult gen pop health and fitness is really focused on just get them tired, get them sweaty. And we look at glycolytic energy system development as the primary means to doing that, that I can do something visceral and challenging on day one without much acknowledgement of the actual quality there for a movement. And we see it deteriorate rapid. We see strategies to adjust your technique from using more momentum and overcoming whatever limitations that energy system is creating biomechanically and subsequently from we know long-term physiologically. But again, like can I train with great intent? Can I maintain high quality? Can I get to the targeted effect safely and consistently? That makes a big difference. And I think this is why everyone included should be really interested in the idea of flywheel, isoinertial, conical resistance, because we're all going to have to face this reality of selling what we do, making what we do seem interesting and compelling. And that comes from the how challenging can we make it quickly to create some sort of scarcity based demand and then get them to where they want. Or in a athletic population, there's going to be time that we have to do challenging things. And I could tell you from a short microcycle perspective, for instance, like coming off a spring ball in football and we have a 2 week period, probably going to be a little bit more hypertrophy focused. Can I put on some lean tissue after coming off a 5 week practice period? Can I get them aware that there's been a decay or some sort of limitation in their development coming off of a practice period? Not it's the point to play football, but we have to get back on track and hitting them with a 2 week or mesocycle of heavy glycolytic work or lactic work in that situation is, I think, necessary, but also too, comes with doesn't come without its potential downsides and costs. So thinking about that with the exercise we choose and the resistance that we start to utilize can make a big difference in the outcome you get. So for instance, today would be a 3 day, this is 3 day total body program. I put in the example of this, the circuit that you can utilize. On this example, I'm doing a front foot elevated split squat, 5x8 with a 4 tempo, 10-second break immediately into single arm versus row. So I'm in this standing position, I'm rowing, I'm getting a little rotation of my thorax. Then I hit single leg RDL with the kettlebell or dumbbell. Then I go back into a press. So I'm rotating through the thorax, and then I hit a ski erg. I went 3 weeks of this. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty gassed every single time, but it's 40-minute quick hit. And, one thing that becomes very evident is can I maintain quality on these gravity-based movements? And then this became like I can adjust the intensity. The harder I press, the more that eccentric load is, and that's the more I got to react and absorb. But it's good in that way that I can now adjust those things when necessary and push in other areas because gravity-based stuff typically doesn't change during the set, and you're going to be what you're going to be in that period. All right, then we're going to look at day 2. So I did dips, flywheel RDL, seated pull down versus squat to row. So a little bit less load on the anterior chain, and then I ran on the curve. So 8, 8, 8, 8 each, and then zero 0.1 miles. This day was some of these exercises for me, like dips. I'm pretty good with body weight exercises, so not too challenging. But working with some clients and doing body weight exercises, like it hits a point of not even diminishing returns, it hits that brick wall. So if you have someone with a lot of relative body weight or a lot relative strength, and they're really good with body weight exercises, it might be too easy. If you hit someone with maybe higher body masses and not a lot of relative strength, it might be too challenging. So lesson there is, yes, although body weight exercises, relative strength are a great fail safe. And that's always where I go to with glycolytic or this intermediate zone stuff is what's a quicker fail safe. And getting outside of that zone because I have now better forms of resistance to keep quality higher longer and not just defaulting to what's the fail safe. If it gets crappy, how are they going to stop here? And then going to another level of, I don't need to do that as much anymore because I have better forms of resistance. This day was for me, I would say, relatively speaking, day 1 is a lot easier. And then on my last day, I did deadlifts, seated versus row, prone flywheel leg curl, which was pretty scary and awesome, kettlebell push press, and then kettlebell swing. Interesting on the push press and the swing here. Now I'm utilizing more momentum with a fixed object or a kettlebell. Uh, on both the push press and swing. So the more efficient I am, the better on this. And one thing that you learn from this is a big influence on me going into learning isoinertial work or flywheel conical resistance is grooving the pattern. That the first couple reps is like getting on a horse and you got to essentially get control. I got to hold on to the rein. I got to dig my heels in. I got to be very, very confident. And that just takes reps. It takes this transition from the first rep to the second rep, from the first set to the second set. You just groove, right? And this is when anyone that's ever done any work with kettlebell, it gets into this, just get a high set strategy going. Like learn how to swing by just getting a bunch of sets. And each set gets a little bit better. Organically, it's very self-corrective. It fixes you. And I thought this would be a great option for day 3 on a Friday workout after a 3 to 5 day work week. So deadlift, you got what you got, and it's pretty quick fail safe. The row, I thought this one in terms of upper back and fatigue was starting to crank up. I wanted to get a little bit more posterior chain, so getting more knee dominant posterior chain as opposed to hip dominant, and then the push press. And if you think about the push press, if you do it right, if you unlock your ankle, knee, and hip, try to keep your torso vertical so we don't have this forward arc of the resistance, as well as potentially as I absorb coming straight down, unlocking my ankle, knee, and hip. It's going to get a lot of quarter squat effect. So the momentum I'll be able to generate from the ground up comes from that. Can I unlock my ankle, knee, and hip? Can I eccentrically load that quad? And then can I react to that short amortization and drive up and create a lot of momentum into those bells to drive vertically? And then the final aspect would be just a good swing, right? Like just load that hip complex and now I got it. And if you don't have good spinal erector, hip, or upper back strength and stamina, you're going to get exposed in this one. So probably arguably sub out maybe the flywheel leg curl for a little bit more anterior chain. Very easily could do that. But all in all, we're really breaking this down. You can see here from the circuit that instead of doing like rotational chops and lifts, I wanted to get more of a direct targeted energy system work. And then on the stuff that I'm doing with the Versapulley or the flywheel from Kratos was try to change my stance, change my orientation to hit that thorax and that pelvis in this rotational thing by either resisting the motion or facilitating the motion. So all in all, 3 weeks of this, 3 days, broke it up a little bit, zone 2 work in between, got pretty dang good results. I mean, my training motivation was really good. I would say my fitness levels improved quite a bit. My body composite changed substantially. I went from like 210 to 199 and I lost about 3% body fat. Like all that being said is there's a forced evolution effect when you're going through this and you're kind of eating like crap. These are way harder. So glycolytic stuff is going to create more acidity. So if I'm eating a lot of animal proteins without a lot of fiber or stuff with more of this alkaline base, I'm not going to be able to recover as quickly as I want. So big caveat there is forced evolution was really a big part of this. All right, guys, I'm gonna pause right there. I'll get this uploaded and you guys can break through it. Please ask questions and appreciate your time.